What's up, guys? I'm back with another lecture PowerPoint video thing. Um, Today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about Chapter 8, Lesson 1, Revolution and Nationalism in Latin America. But specifically, class, I'm going to go ahead and focus on Mexico. There's some stuff about Brazil in the book that is don't get me wrong, is important in terms of what it means for South America, but we can't relate really well with it. So we're going to go ahead and talk about Mexico. So in this picture class, we're going to talk about a time period from 1910 to 1939. So it's kind of sort of pretty much what's going on in Mexico during World War I, all the way to pretty much World War II. So we're going to talk about this time period in Mexico. So here's going to be a classic photo of, we've all seen pictures like this of revolutionaries in Mexico. So this here is peasants joined the Mexican Revolution in the hopes of improving their lives. Most were untrained and had few supplies, but they continued to fight for social, political, and economic change. Class, so those three things right there, social, political, and economic change, are going to be huge. That's what all of this fighting and war and rebellion and backstabbing, that's all it's going to be about. Trying to create a better Mexico for a lot of these peasants. So let's go ahead and get started. These are going to be your learning objectives over here on the left. Like I said last time and every single time, these are going to be in your standards, your Common Core standards, your California state standards. So the questions are going to be: identify causes and effects of the Mexican Revolution, analyze the effects of economic and political nationalism on Latin America, trace the changing relationship between Latin America and the United States. Okay, class, so the key terms are going to be, excuse my terrible accent, absolutely terrible accent. I was practicing saying these names and my girlfriend just wouldn't stop laughing at me because I just can't do some of these words. Like Porfirio Diaz, Haciendas, Emiliano Zapata, Venustiano Carranza, nationalization, Lázaro Cárdenas, economic nationalism, cultural nationalism, and good neighbor policy. So class, just to let you know, the last three here, I'm not going to cover very well. I'll talk about it, but it's not actually written out in this paragraph because it's more of a big topic, more than just Mexico. It's mostly most of the Americas. So we're going to talk about that later. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the Mexican Revolution. By 1910, the dictator Porfirio Diaz had ruled Mexico for almost 35 years, winning re-election as president again and again. On the surface, Mexico enjoyed peace and economic growth. Diaz welcomed foreign investors who developed mines, built railroads, and drilled for oil. So class, this is going to be a time of incredible growth. Mexico is going to become more than just a prior or former, what's the word I'm looking for? Brain fart. Colony, right? It's going to become more than just an ex-colony of Spain. It's going to become its own country, right? Of course, it's its own country. It got its independence, but it's going to start to establish itself as a rising power, especially in the Americas. They're going to quickly grow, and smartly, Porfirio Diaz is going to want to do something that a lot of these other countries in Latin America are going to kind of struggle to do, but he's going to invite a lot of foreign entities to come in, foreign countries to come in and say, hey, we don't have anything on our own, right? We're a brand new country. We need help. So what he's going to have people do is he's going to have people come in and pretty much take whatever they want in terms of resources, as long as they build the infrastructure. So for example, here, they're talking about mines, railroads, oil refineries. Mexico's not going to have the capabilities of doing it on their own. So they're going to go to these countries and say, hey, well, we need help with mines and mining. Why don't you come over here, build those mines for us, and we'll let you enjoy whatever you take out for a fixed amount of time, right? Or you could come here, drill for oil, take as much oil as you want, as long as you build the oil refineries, the drills and all that. And for a period of time, you could take whatever you want, right? So it's kind of a trade-off, right? I'll give you some resources in return, build what we need for the future, okay? Now, the Mexican Revolution, seeds of discontent. The country's prosperity benefited only the wealthy elite. Shocker, right, class? Like every other country when it's starting off, only the select few at the very top are going to really just start taking money hand over fist. The majority of Mexicans, mestizos, lived in desperate poverty. Most of these peasants worked in haciendas or large plantations. In 1910, Francisco Madero, a liberal reformer, demanded free elections. He was imprisoned by Diaz for his demands. He called for revolution. Soon, revolutionaries all across Mexico joined Madero's call. Faced with rebellion in several parts of the country, Diaz resigned in 1911. So Porfirio Diaz is going to lead on paper, when you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at money, economics, he's going to be solely responsible for this increase of Mexican prestige, this increase of Mexican wealth. However, class, we have to realize that this prestige and this wealth is solely only at the top. Everyone living in there, right, the mestizos, the regular peasants, the natives, they're dirt poor. They're absolutely dirt poor. They have nothing. They absolutely have nothing. They don't have jobs that pay anything. There's no government aid at this point at all. The government and the church are going to own all the land. So people are going to be farming the land and just pretty much taking as much as they can to survive and giving the rest over to the government. A lot of these, we're going to talk about soon, a lot of these revolutionaries are going to come from the poor. They're going to come from the lower class, the peasants, the mestizos. They're going to be natives themselves. They're going to see the amount of poverty, and they're going to want to change that. They're going to see when they go to Mexico City, when they go to Guadalajara, when they go to a lot of these major cities, they're going to see the how much wealth that top percent have. And they're not going to like the fact that the majority, 95, 96% of the country is struggling to survive, right? So people like Madero are pretty much going to say, hey, you're winning all of these elections over and over and over again. And sure, as a country, we're doing better, but as a people, we're doing worse. We keep going more and more backwards as you're going forward. And a lot of people are going to call for constitutional change because the Constitution at the time isn't very good. They picked and choose the best parts of the American Constitution, but they chose the bits that best benefited themselves. So of course, the 1% of, it's written into law that they're going to benefit out of this. And so people like Madero and the other people we're going to talk about soon, they're going to have issues with this. And they're going to say, hey, you know what? If you don't change the Constitution, if you don't change the way you're leading the government and think about more of the people who are voting for you, well, then you should leave. And eventually, of course, Diaz isn't going to like that. He's going to put him in jail. And while he's in jail, a lot of the people in Mexico, all around Mexico, specifically in the South, they're going to start realizing that, hey, this isn't what you should do. This isn't something that's okay. You can't just arrest someone for saying you should change, right? So while Madero's in prison for, virtually no reason, he's going to call out for all of these other, military groups and militias and rebellion groups all across Mexico to rebel. And eventually the massive amounts of people who are for the revolution, for rebelling against the government, is just going to be too much. And smartly, Diaz is going to resign, a couple months later. Now, something's going to happen. A complex struggle is going to emerge. Motherhood, that's not his name. Well, let's go back. Let's go back and change that. Motherhood, Lamau, sorry. Madero, let's go. Let's change it. So Madero's going to become, So Madero's going to become president of Mexico. Soon after Diaz leaves, everyone's going to look at each other and say, hey, well, who should lead the charge? And everyone's going to say, hey, well, you're the reason why he's out. Why don't you become president? And that wasn't a very good idea, right? Madero's going to become president of Mexico, but he turned out to be too liberal for the conservatives and not radical enough for the revolutionaries. So in 1913, only 3 years later, he was murdered by one of his generals, Victoriano Huerta. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I thought I stopped recording. Anyways, Huerta is going to be ruled as a military dictator. He was a general, so he's going to rule as a military dictator, which means he's going to favor a lot of his military generals, and he's going to lead, through fear, pretty much. But he's quickly going to face rebellion himself. During a long, complex power struggle, several radical leaders emerged. So when Huerta kills Madero, he's going to take the presidency, and use it as pretty much as a dictator. And people aren't going to like that, right? They're not going to like that at all. If they don't like, a halfway decent president and Diaz, if they don't like what he's doing and he's not necessarily, forcing people to do things, he's just leading people in the wrong way. He's for sure not going to last. And of course he's not going to last. I'll give you guys a spoiler hint. No one really lasts that long. So let's talk about Emiliano Zapata. So Emiliano Zapata, an Indian peasant farmer, led peasant revolts in southern Mexico. The battle cry for the Zapatistas, as these rebels were called, was Tierra y Libertad, which means land and freedom. He led rebellion efforts against Diaz in 1910. He's going to be one of the people that are going to answer Madero's calls in 1910. He would then again lead his forces with Carranza, Villa, and Obregón against Madero. He would be assassinated by now President Carranza's goons in 1919 after Carranza turned on the revolutionaries that helped him gain governmental power. So let's go back over here. So when Huerta becomes president after Madero, he's not going to last, right? We know this already. But we have to remember, class, that Zapata is also going to be one of the people that turns against Madero. He's gonna be one of those revolutions that aren't gonna think it's radical enough. To him it's gonna be too conservative, and he, along with Huerta, they're going to team up and pretty much go against Madero and Madero's, just lack of a better term, just boring outlook on government. It wasn't exciting enough for a lot of the peasants who thought that now that Diaz is gone, someone's gonna come in here and radically change the way we live. And that's not going to happen, right, class? That's not going to happen. It's too much. So people like Emiliano Zapata and Huertas, they're going to team up together and say, hey, well, if he's not going to be radical enough, we'll do it, right? Huerta, along with Zapata and other people, are going to, they're going to be the ones that are going to have, hey, why don't we just get rid of him? And they do, and they get rid of him. Right, class? So now we know about his forces. He's going to join with Carranza, Villa, and Obregón against Madero. So let's talk about Villa. Francisco Pancho Villa, a hard-hitting rebel from the north, fought mostly for personal power, but won the intense loyalty of his peasant followers. Villa and Zapata formed an uneasy coalition of Venustiano, never say his name, Venustiano Carranza, a rich landowner who wanted political reform but opposed the social change. Along with Alvaro Obregón, the revolutionaries will be kind of sort of successful at bringing political change during this complex times. Well, class, it's going to be the reason why I put quotes kind of sort of was they were successful at bringing the change, but they were unsuccessful every single step of the way. Now, what does that mean? Eventually, because they kept, pardon the language, but they kept effing up so much that eventually someone's going to come into power and say, hey, I figured it out. We could fix this, right? But it's not going to be because they put the guy in charge. It's going to be as a result of them constantly just duking it out amongst themselves. Someone's going to come along and say, hey, I know what to do. Let's fix this. So when we talk about Carranza, right, we talked about here, Carranza is going to eventually get into power, and he's going to turn on both of these men, right? This is a very ironic issue because they're going to constantly be. So let's back this up. Pancho Villa and Zapata are in two separate locations in Mexico. One's in the south, right? One's in the south. That's going to be Zapata, and Pancho Villa is going to be in the north. Pancho Villa is going to be famous, especially in like Texas and New Mexico and kind of the southern United States, because he's going to constantly lead raids into the United States. So this guy Pancho Villa, in the eyes of a lot of Americans, right, he was just a terrible human being. Right, he killed 16 Americans in a raid in New Mexico. President Woodrow Wilson's not going to trust Mexico at all because of this guy. When we talk about World War I, Woodrow Wilson's not going to want anything to do with Mexico because Pancho Villa is just constantly going to be a thorn in America's side. He'll be making raids into Texas and just stealing grain. He'll be doing stuff like that, stealing money. and he's going to be viewed as an outlaw, outcast in the eyes of a lot of Americans. But a lot of people in the, in the northern Mexico are going to kind of see him as like a Robin Hood type of figure. However, we got to realize that he's not doing anything for people. He's not necessarily a Zapata type person who's trying to lead his community for better good. He's doing all of this for personal gain. He's doing all of this so that he could get more political power, because he's seeing what's happening with Carranza. He's seeing what's happening with Madero, and he wants to be the next guy. He wants to not necessarily be president, but he wants to be in that same position of power. And he's not necessarily going to have that. Right. So with these people, you're going to see them constantly kind of befriend each other. They're going to be making alliances, but as soon as they can, they're going to turn their backs on each other and ultimately kill each other. That's how both of them are going to die. Zapata is going to get killed by Carranza as soon as they get together. Right. Villa and Zapata are going to find. They're going to get together along with Carranza and go after Madero. And it's just like a really bad triangle of complexity, where someone's going to try to help someone out. As soon as they help them out, they're going to say, hey, since I helped you out, why don't you come help me out? And they'll come to help them out. This is what's going to happen to Zapata. They're going to come help him out, get betrayed, and just get slaughtered, really. Just get, find themselves full of bullet holes. Right? So eventually, this guy, Venustiano Carranza, he's going to turn on both of them, and he's eventually going to become the president. Carranza had called for a new constitution, during the Mexican Revolution, but he did not like the one he had reluctantly signed in 1917 and did not institute its reforms. In 1920, rival revolutionaries arranged for his assassination. Spoiler alert, they all get assassinated. It's not, I don't want to make light of it, but, it's karma. The Constitution, however, survived with some revisions. It is still in effect today. So Venustiano Carranza, with the help of Zapata and Villa and Obregón to the south, he's going to be the one that's ultimately going to win, the power struggle, really. After they kick out Madero, he's going to be the more intellectual of the four. And he's going to see himself and have more visions of grandeur. He's going to be able to kind of like a puppet master. He's going to be able to shift and move a lot of these revolutionaries throughout Mexico so that he's always at the right place at the right time. And eventually he's just going to grow tired of having to deal with all these other people. So he's just going to have them murdered. He's going to be the one that's going to turn his back on Emiliano Zapata. He have him killed. He's also going to turn his back on Pancho Villa and allow him to get captured and killed by other revolutionaries. And then eventually, what you do unto others is going to happen to you. And then Venustiano Carranza himself is going to get assassinated just 3 years later. But the big thing about him is that he's going to sign a constitution that he doesn't want to sign. And so once he signs it, he becomes president, he just ignores it. He just keeps it over there and says, yeah, I know I signed it, but I want nothing to do with it. So after he dies, the Constitution is still there. It's still written out. And a lot of the people who come after him are going to like it. So, of course, like our Constitution, they're just going to add a couple amendments here and there, and they're pretty much going to keep it in effect as it is when he signed it in 1917, with a little bit of tweaks here and there. Right, so during the Constitutional Convention in Querétaro, Venustiano Carranza chaired the committee that drafted the Constitution in 1917. The Congress approved it on February 5th, 1917. So here he is right here. And yeah, he's going to say, hey, let's make this Constitution. He's ultimately not going to like it, but he signs it anyways. I don't understand how that works, but that's what happened. Now, economic and social reforms, the Constitution of 1917. So let's talk about this Constitution a little bit more. The Constitution of 1917 addressed three major issues: land, religion, and labor. The Constitution strengthened government control over the economy. It permitted to break up of larger states. It's going to release restrictions on, it's going to place restrictions on foreigners owning land and allowing nationalization or government takeover of natural resources. Church land was made the property of the nation. The Constitution set a minimum wage and protected workers' rights to strike. Although the Constitution gave suffrage only to men, it did give women more rights than most countries at the time. So this Constitution is going to be a big deal. So let's talk about those three things. So land. When Porfirio Diaz was in charge, he was giving out massive amounts of land to other people. He didn't really necessarily care who was owning the land or what they were doing with it, as long as they were paying Mexican taxes. Now that's going to be an issue because when you look at a map, 95% of the map is going to be owned by foreign people who have nothing to do with Mexico, people who are not even there. So you're going to have a lot of Americans, a lot of Spanish, a lot of British, a lot of Germans having a lot of this land, so that the peasants, the people who are actually living there, they have no right to anything. So a lot of these revolutionaries are going to say, well, that's not very fair. So as soon as this Constitution is passed, he's going to get rid of a lot of those restrictions, especially for landowning. So one of those things that still stands today is you have to be a Mexican citizen for you to own Mexican land, which means me. I was born in the United States. I'm not a Mexican citizen. I'm not. I have a passport, but that doesn't make me a Mexican citizen. I cannot own land. I cannot own land. I cannot go to buy an acre to build a house. I would have to put that under like my mom's name. My mom was born in Mexico, or my tata or my nana's name. Or since my mom was born in Mexico, I have the right to become a dual citizen. I could go to Mexico and it's a process. It takes a couple months, but I could eventually get dual nationalized, and I could be an American and Mexican citizen. Once I do that, then I can go ahead and own land in Mexico. But as of right now, you have to be a citizen. You have to have a passport, a Mexican passport. I have an American passport, right, class? So that's going to be one of the things. Now, religion is kind of it's going to go also into this area of land. The Catholic Church is going to have a massive stronghold on Mexican culture, even to this day. Catholicism and the Catholic Church is going to own, especially during the era of Porfirio Diaz, who was extremely, especially socially, extremely conservative. So he's going to give the church a ton of powers. He's going to allow them to own just massive amounts of land, and they're not going to tax. They're not going to do anything with the land, and they're just going to have it. That's going to be another issue when it comes to this land reforms. So what they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and just take the land from the church, and they're going to deem that property of the nation. So instead of that church being owned by really nobody, because, right, the church is just like an entity. It's not a real person. You can't go to this land and say, hey, I'll buy this off of you. You can't. You'd have to go to Rome, right? Or you'd have to go to the diocese in Mexico City. It's a very complex matter. But when these signs the Constitution, all church land is now land of the government, right? The property of the nation. So if the government takes, right, let's say a church, right, class, let's say this is a town, and the church owns all of this land. The town is built on church land. Now, if I want to build something on that land, who do I have to ask? Well, I have to ask the church somehow, some way. So a lot of people they're just not going to do it because it's such a long and mysterious, complex, set of things you have to do. So when now this town, this set of land is now controlled by the government, who do you go to? Well, you go to the local government. You say, hey, I would like to build something here, or hey, I would like to buy this off of you. And then it becomes a much easier process to do. Now, the third thing, labor, is going to be, a very interesting thing. They're going to be very pro-union, as much as you possibly can as a government. They're going to be very pro-union. They're going to be very pro-workers' rights, because a lot of the people who wrote that Constitution are going to be the ones that were fighting for workers' rights, during Porfirio Diaz. So that's going to be a big deal. And then, of course, socially, women aren't going to have the right to vote yet. However, class, they're going to have a ton more rights than a lot of most countries, especially of Europe. They're going to be very progressive when it comes to women, which is funny to say because, Mexico is viewed as very machismo and very machista, whatever the word is, machismoism or whatever. Very, male-oriented. But in terms of the way women have power in government, especially in terms of economic rights, is going to be very, very progressive. So, for example, women and men have to have the same pay rate no matter what the job is. So if you have a female dentist and a male dentist, they have to get paid the same. If you have a female lawyer and a male lawyer, they have to, which is written in the Constitution, have to be paid the same. Now, what isn't mentioned in here is you have to have a certain amount of each. So if you're owning a law firm and you're, for whatever reason, more machismo than the next, and you don't want to hire women, or you don't think they should get paid the same, well, then you just don't have to hire them. You can discriminate, and there's nothing in the Constitution that states you can't do that. So that's going to be the issue. But at least they get paid the same, right? They have that but at the end of it. So class, this is going to lead to, in my opinion, I think, and for at least this 100 years, one of the only presidents that actually does very, very well. He's going to be very controversial, especially in the United States, but he's going to be one of the presidents that I view in the same light as an Abraham Lincoln or a George Washington, someone who's really going to solidify the country and make it legitimate. Lázaro Cárdenas is going to be extremely influential, and I think regardless of your politics, or regardless of the way he does certain things, he's going to be someone who really did look at Mexico and say, what can I do to make it better? And he's going to make it better, without a doubt. So let's talk about him. Slowly but surely, things started to change. In the 1930s, President Lázaro Cárdenas made the decision to redistribute millions of acres of land to peasants under a new land program. The government supported labor unions and launched a massive effort to combat illiteracy. Schools and libraries are set up. Under President Cárdenas' leadership, his political party, PRI, took a strong role in directing the economy. In 1938, labor disputes broke out between Mexican workers and management of some foreign-owned petroleum, which are gas, companies. In response, the president nationalized Mexico's oil resources. American and British oil companies resisted Cárdenas' decision, but eventually accepted compensation for their losses. Mexicans felt that they were at last gaining economic independence from foreign influence. So Lázaro Cárdenas in the 30s is going to really set Mexico in a path that, of course, the path is very rocky, but it's still going to be a path nonetheless. Economically, he's going to do very, very, very important things. And he couldn't do it without his political party, without their just domination of the culture. And that's going to be PRI, which is still around. It's Mexico's oldest political party. So, of course, if you listen to any station here in the Valley, radio station, that's based out of Mexicali. So that's 98.3, 99.3, and so on and so forth. And they have commercials where they talk about, the government, right? And it's always usually paid for by two political parties. That's going to be PRI and PAN. And those two, kind of like the Democrats and Republicans here, are going to be the ones that are going to, of course, there's other parties, but it's going to usually be those two parties going forward. So what he's going to do, class, is he's going to take the ideas that Carranza wrote in the Constitution that he didn't like, and he's going to take it one step further. He's going to go ahead and he's going to start targeting individuals. He's going to start targeting wealthy individuals and saying, hey, there's no reason for you to have 15,000 acres of land. What are you doing with it? And if they can't give them an actual reason or an actual excuse to have that much land, he says, give me a reason, give me a valid reason why you need it. And if you don't, it's the government's. We're going to go ahead and give that to the peasants. So instead of the peasants, not having anything, each peasant is, let's just say, for example, they're going to be giving 5 acres. And they're going to go to these peasants and say, hey, here's 5 acres of land. Here's a set of tools. Here's access to water. Here's access to, ox or cows or bulls, so you could actually till the land. And if you're not successful, that's on you. If you can't support yourself, that's on you. Then you need to go and get government assistance. Until then, you have all the resources to make something out of it, He's going to do this for millions of people, and it's really going to change, just dramatically change the way people are going to view the president and the presidency. He's going to go ahead and he's going to support labor unions. But the biggest thing is he's going to support schools. Schools and libraries are going to be set up. And this is going to be huge because the majority of people in Mexico don't actually speak Spanish at this time. A lot of the people are going to speak their local dialect. So So if you're a family that's growing up in Querétaro, I'm just saying that because it was in the last slide. Querétaro is going to be an area in the Yucatan that's very Mayan heavy in terms of culture. A lot of people, especially at that time, are going to be speaking Mayan. They're going to be speaking other native Indian languages. They're not necessarily going to be speaking Spanish. So when he sets up these schools, he's going to be responsible for this increase of Spanish identity, of this Mexican language, not Spanish like the Royal Spanish where, Barcelona, where they talk like that, but it's going to be more specific to Mexico. That's going to be huge because that's going to unite the country. So people from Madero, people from Zacatecas, people from Mexicali, they're going to be able to meet and actually speak to each other in the same common tongue. And that's going to be huge, class, because Mexico, just like the United States, doesn't have a national language. However, class, there's going to be more languages in Mexico than there is in the United States, right? Because we have to realize that there was massive empires when Spanish got here, right? There was the Olmecs, the Toltecs, right? There's all of these different cultures. Of course, there's different cultures in America too, but they weren't going to be as lasting. So when they start to speak Spanish, this is going to lead to a sense of nationalism. And the second thing I want to talk about is something that we're kind of seeing them go away from now, but is the nationalization of their resources. So they're going to be in a disagreement between, I believe it's British Petroleum, BP, a foreign gas company, petroleum company, petrol company, is going to have a disagreement with a lot of the Mexican workers. So as a result of that, Cárdenas is going to go in and say, hey, you know what? Get out. If you can't handle our people, get out. So what he's going to do is he's going to kick out all of the foreign people, all of the foreign companies out of the country. Now that's very ballsy with that, I don't want to say with that lack of terms, right? That's very courageous because the United States, they could view that as something very negative. And they did view that as very negative because, they had the rights to it, right? And quote unquote, as Porfirio Diaz said 20 years ago at this time, as long as you build it, you have a set term limit of when you can use those resources. So they're going to be upset. The United States is going to be really upset. A lot of these British oil companies are going to be very upset. But what Cárdenas is going to do is he's going to pay them very handsomely. He's going to give them a ton of money for all this. So what does that mean? So class, for those of you guys who go to Mexicali or go to Mexico a lot, you're going to notice that now you're going to start seeing Shell, you're going to start seeing BP, you're going to start seeing AMPMs. But, not that long ago, there was only one gas station. That was Pemex, right? Petroleum Mexico, right? That's what Pemex stood for. Now, what that means is Mexico is going to own every step of production. So Mexico is going to pretty much pay itself to use the gasoline. So, for example, class, what was happening before was there is a foreign company in your land. They're taking the resources that belong to you. They're taking that oil, taking it to America. They're taking it to England. They're refining it to make it into gasoline that you put in your car. And then they're selling it back to you, right? So you're paying them money for something that you have yourself. So what they're going to do is they're going to build and fix and build upon, I should say, a lot of the refineries that other countries built in Mexico. So now the Mexicans in Mexico on Mexican land are going to take Mexican gasoline. They're going to refine it in Mexico and then pay themselves for it. So that money, instead of that money going out of the country, that money stays in the country. That's going to be huge because now Mexico doesn't have to, they don't have to rely on foreign influence. They don't have to rely on, hey, America, can you please give us a discount or can you please give us a deal on gas, right? They don't have to do that anymore. And that's huge. Right, class? He's going to be viewed as pretty much, not this necessarily the savior of Mexico, but he's going to be viewed as, like I said, as a George Washington type figure. For those of you guys who go to Mexicali a lot, have family a lot, or family there and you visit a lot, or are from Mexicali, you should be able to recognize this statue. This is the statue of Lázaro Cárdenas in Mexicali. He's going to have massive statues like this throughout Mexico. just everywhere. There's going to be cities named after him. He's going to be viewed as, like I say all the time, there's Alexander the Great, there's Sophia the Great. There's a lot of these leaders who deserve that term, who don't necessarily get it as time, goes on because they have real names. But he's one of the few class that I would say he deserves that title, especially for the people in Mexico. He's going to do very, very well for them. So let's look at this, the land distributed in Mexico by presidents, right, class? So if you look at it, Venustiano Carranza from 1915 to 1920, he's going to be all talk. He's going to talk about this land redistribution, taking land away from the wealthy elites. However, he's just not going to do it. He's absolutely not going to do it. So the 5 presidents between those 14 years after Carranza, they're going to redistribute 33% of the land. But Lázaro Cárdenas is going to come in and he's actually going to walk that walk. He's actually going to be the one who actually puts it into action. Right? And of course, class, this is the quiz at the end. So go ahead and write these in your notes. What caused many people in urban middle class to oppose Diaz's dictatorship and support a political revolution? What did the Constitution of 1917 try to resolve some of the problems that started the Mexican Revolution? How were economic and political nationalism in Latin America related? And that's it. Only 3 this time. All right, class? So hopefully that's a little eye-opening in terms of Mexico, right, class? Again, the only reason why we're, I'm really talking about this is because we're going to hear a lot of these names. Like, for example, Cárdenas, the store in El Centro in Calexico, it's named after the president, right? You're going to see, especially if you go to restaurants, right, you'll see pictures of Pancho Villa, you see pictures of Zapata, of Obregón. When you look at the names for these countries, for the states in Mexico, they're named after Obregón, they're named after Guerrero, they're named after Hidalgo. Who are these people, right? And the reason why we're covering it is because we can relate to it, right? We have a lot of people who go to Mexicali. We have a lot of people who look at the money. We have a lot of people who talk with their relatives. And it's important to kind of know, not in great detail, of course, right? We're not going to go into super good detail about this. But it's good enough to know, to hear about, hey, who is that person? Why is he important? Or when you go to Mexicali and you see these statues, you could ask yourself, oh, I know who that is, right? I know why he's important. He's all right, and so on and so forth. So this is going to be the only PowerPoint video that I'm going to make for chapter 8, because like I said, it is super simple. I just want you guys to read it, just quickly cover it, answer the few questions I have about it. And other than that, class, I'll see you next week. Well, I won't see you next week, but I'll be making PowerPoints about the new packet when we talk about World War II. And hopefully you get excited about that, because I'm excited about that. And we're going to go into super good detail about World War II. All right, class. Hope everything's fine with you guys. Hope everything's good. I'll talk to you guys later.